Welcome to the Buds and Reality Show, the number one liberty podcast in Detroit. I am Shaun Collins, the guy with a lot to say, and I'm here with my guest. He's an entrepreneur. He's an author. He's a musical artist, Mr. Jack Lloyd. How you doing, dude?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm doing overall great. Just waiting for the storm situation, see how that's going to pass through or not. We'll see. But outside that, really good.
Yeah, I know you're down south. You're down there in the dirty, dirty south. Not really the dirty south, but back in the day, I'm a big old school hip hop guy. Say that 10 times fast. And it was always like the dirty South, and us, up north Yankees are like, it's the dirty South, it's the dirty South. But you guys got some big things headed your way. By the time the show comes out, it'll probably be gone. I would certainly hope so, anyways. But you've been busy, dude. You've been like I said, you're in the music world, you're writing. Actually, you just came out with something, and I'm gonna let you take it from there.
Yeah, we just released our End the Fed music video. So that was something that we shot in Washington, D.C. We shot that during the week of the LP National Convention. So we decided to do two things at once, go there, get some cool shots because we could actually go in front of the Federal Reserve Building and Congress and Washington Monument, so on and so forth, and get some good, backgrounds to our End the Fed message, and then hang out there for the week and table and things like that. So the End the Fed music video came out great. We were really impressed with, all the visuals, and we worked hard on the special effects as best we could. And there's a really great surprise ending at the end of the music video for those who really like the idea of ending the Fed. So definitely watch it and watch all the way through to the end of the music video because there's something special there.
Well, I mean, ending the Fed owns my heart. One of the things I really drive on this show is like economics and in the banking system and what's going on with it and how to fix it. That's kind of like what I do a lot on Buds these days. The video itself and the song itself, it had a lot of it kind of gave me Depeche Mode vibes. It really did, which was cool. I'm a big Depeche Mode fan, to be quite honest. I'm a huge fan of those guys. So when I saw them, I'm like, okay, you got Depeche Mode vibe going, and you're preaching a good message. We're not going to talk about the ending on the show. You can go look at it for yourself because I want you to. You know what I mean? But like, and also you just came out with a new comic.
Yeah, our Voluntaryist Suit Saga 2 campaign just launched today. We have our first ever little animated trailer with it too. Nothing like too crazy, but just a little upgrade, a little fun to have some animation showing off what's going on in the comic and get people excited about it. So that just launched this morning, and it's been pretty exciting just getting that out there. It's been tough, of course, trying to reach people because between the hurricanes and crazy stuff going on with the election stuff and all the stuff in the world, there's a lot of things that are vying for people's attention right now. So, it's tough to get the word out, but we're doing our best considering the circumstances. So
I think you guys are doing a great job with that, but let me ask you something, because you write books. I have them all right here. I got boom, boom, boom. I got the 3 books. I'm not a big comic guy. I don't have those, but like when you're writing these things, you got to be in a totally different vibe or mindset when you're writing the 2, or no?
Well, when it comes to writing the books that I wrote, those were a product of many, many years of debating and arguing and formal education and things like that. So, a little bit of it was me writing articles over the years and kind of developing my ideas. And then kind of the second 2 books, I kind of wrote a little bit more just independently. But it's certainly a different type of tone than the goofy, silly, fun stuff that we do in other cases, of course. My nonfiction books are a bit more serious and more straightforward about philosophy and ethics and helping people understand what the government's doing and why it's unethical, and some ideas about how to start living independently and thinking outside the state. It's kind of what I did with a Vision for a Libertarian Future and Philosophical Voluntaryism, a bit of self-help plus thinking about ways to modify the way that we approach the state and think about how to exit that paradigm.
Which I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because philosophy is a huge, huge thing within the libertarian movement. And I feel like, me personally, I look at libertarianism as one big giant economic philosophy based off the non-aggression principle, the NAP, as some would call it. Where are you when it comes to that?
Well, I mean, economics is just a study of what is in terms of human actions. So the moral philosophy is definitely separate, the ethics, because you could understand the cause and effect relationships, with raising the minimum wage or price controls and things like that. And you could still act unethically and say, yeah, I know this is going to hurt people, but I don't care. So that's why it's important to have both ethics and economics, because even if you have the economics down, you could still choose to be like, yeah, I don't care if this hurts people. I want to control people and I want to, do this for my own power. So that's very important as well, to educate people on both the ethical principles and the economic principles.
Which is a fantastic idea. And, I've read all your books. So, and I've learned a lot from them. One of the things you kind of harped on was voluntaryism, which is huge. Everything should be, paid for voluntary. Nothing should be taken, from the rule of a gun. And a lot of people be like, paying taxes is not, done under the rule of a gun. And I was like, well, hey, knock yourself out and try not paying your taxes for a few years and let me know how that works out for you. Because you're going to have guys with suits and badges and rifles at your doorstep wanting to talk to you.
Yeah, and that's exactly the nature of taxation. It's imposed on all at birth. And some might be like, what do you mean at birth? I'm like, yeah, see, even child workers get taxed. If you're a child actor, for example, and you get checks as a child actor, the government taxes that. So this idea that the government, doesn't tax you till later is itself kind of silly. The government, just unilaterally says no matter what you do, no matter whether you agree with what we do with it or not, and just by virtue of being born in a certain area, we get to plunder you. And of course, that's totally unethical. And the nature of the government itself came from plunder. Of course, it's not that the government was comprised of just people who said, we're going to come together and just pool our resources, a bunch of rich people, and we'll just provide for people if they want to support us. Great. If not, whatever. They used a force to take from people, and said, if you don't give us that money, we're going to use violence against you. As early as George Washington and the Whiskey Rebellion, people not wanting to pay a whiskey tax, and using real violence to go and get that tax. So it's not really that confusing when you lay it down. It's just the government's done a really good job of obfuscating the reality by continuing to pass down how those levers are pulled, right? They have employers take your money out so you don't see it, and they're kind of acting as a middleman, sales taxes being taken at the register, that kind of thing. So they use other people to, kind of get that money for them so they don't have to do the dirty work and like put a gun to your head every time. And then people get accustomed to that. And only down the road, after they send you some letters and things like that, do they start to use violent force. And they do that because they want people to believe that they're voluntarily contributing, even though ultimately they're not. And so the more that they can keep up that ruse and distance themselves, that is the government workers, from the actual violence, the more that they can hide under that shroud of legitimacy and seeming like they're benevolent. So,
and I'm glad you brought that up because, a lot of people believe that taxation is the price we pay to live in a civilized society, which I have plenty of jokes to go with that, but we don't need to get into that right now. But, and it's another, another reason people believe taxation is good is because we're helping others. This is a perfect time to talk about this. You're down there with all the hurricanes. Hurricanes have already come through and destroyed a lot of the South and the East Coast. And we have those FEMA folks that are down there. They came down there to help, right? FEMA was there. They're there to help and, get people out of there and whatnot. But there's some people out there in the world who wanted to come down there and help on their own accord. And FEMA literally threatened them with arrest if they came down there to try to help. So us being, anarcho-capitalist, because I am an ANCAP. I'm not a libertarian at all whatsoever. I don't claim that anymore. I haven't in quite some time. And I know you're an ANCAP as well. But you look at these things, and for the people who think that this taxation is for helping others, you're not seeing it help anyone. And they're actually threatening not only arrest, but maybe even violence if people try to cross those lines over there to try to help their fellow man. Take it from there, Mr. Lloyd.
Well, yeah, I think that, what's first missed, of course, in that situation with FEMA is that the government is already taking from people. So they're already making it harder for people to take care of themselves and help others. And then when they collectivize this money, they end up mismanaging it, and then at worst, actually using it to deprive people of resources and to stop private charity and to, basically be like, oh, see, we're going to be the ones who save, nobody else can because we want the spotlight. Meanwhile, they're, not helping anybody. So, this is not a new thing either. I mean, people learned about this with Hurricane Katrina and all the stuff that went down that way. But it's just more clear than ever, I think, in this day and age of digital technology. You couldn't get as quick of an insight that you could, for example, with Katrina, back then, 05. Now, when the government is acting this way, it's immediate. People are getting pictures, video, mass media out right away, showing that the government is interfering with this and stopping private charity and making it hard for people to actually, rescue others. So I think that that's a good thing that the government's being exposed in this, but it's also tragic because, people are suffering precisely because the federal government has not only taken resources from people, but is using those resources actually for others who are not even American citizens, of course. They're sending it to foreign governments and foreigners. And then the personnel is frustrating volunteer efforts. So it's pretty evil. I said the other day, it's one of the most evil orchestrations you can possibly imagine, to have your own resources be used against you to starve you and to keep you from being rescued. I mean, that's absolutely evil. That's a double whammy of theft and, starvation and really hurting people. So.
But we see things, for the people who really don't care about what FEMA is saying to people and trying to stop them or whatever. Like a friend of mine, Shane Hazel, and his Bitcoin veterans, they packed up a trailer and they drove up north. He's down there in Georgia, and he took his truck and his trailer up there with supplies and stuff like that. He said, nobody's going to stop us from doing this. Just his organization. And this is from yesterday, and it'll probably be much more by the time the show goes out. But they had already come up with $20,000 on their own through voluntary donations, through just like people out of the goodness of their heart. Nobody was getting taxed. There's no, none of that. Nobody was being forced to give their money to help people. They were just voluntarily doing it. And so things like this are a testament to where like voluntarism does work. And right now there's other people, like there's people up here in Michigan who they're not necessarily going down there, but they're sending money to local churches because the local churches can't be messed with down there. So rather than, send their supplies and try to break barriers and get in trouble with the government, they're dealing with the local churches to bypass a lot of that nonsense that FEMA's pulling off down there.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And it's just one of those many examples that, throughout history, it's just very abundantly clear that when people are free to choose and they're able to help others, it's much more efficient and effective because the people who are delivering those services are directly there and they're directly responsible for what resources they have and seeing who's in need. Whereas, with a big bureaucracy like the federal government, there's so many layers of bureaucrats things go through and so many people getting paid in the process and so many perverse incentives that nothing just ever gets done. Or if it does get done, it's way too late. We talked about this, I think, a while ago back when there was a hurricane that hit Louisiana, and the Cajun Navy was told to stand down because they didn't want them saving people. And they said, no, we're going to go save people. They saved like 5,000 people. So, the government, it really does get in the way of voluntary charity and people who are there at the scene. They're local. They understand the area, those kinds of things. You have local knowledge issues that are missed often, when you have a bigger outside agency. So it's much better to have things like private civic organizations and churches and people who, have their own friends and family. They're in direct contact. They can actually know who needs what. That's way wiser, than having some abstract government bureaucracy thousands of miles away from the problem and try to figure things out.
Oh, yeah, you got that right. Because everything, let's be honest, everything the federal government touches turns into a dumpster fire. All of it. All of it. The proof's in the pudding. You look at it, you look at education, you look at healthcare, you look at, the border, you look at, abortion, you look at everything from a broad perspective, and you're like, wow, every time they try to help, it turns into a complete disaster. Look at the COVID response. That was a disaster. They were trying to help. At a certain point, us as a people and us as a, society per se, need to just go, hey, maybe what these people are doing is wrong. but also a lot of these people who might see that don't know where to go. Like I live in shit lib country. I'm just outside Detroit, Michigan, man. Literally, that the infamous 8 Mile road, 2 miles right down the road from me, literally. What we're seeing here in Detroit is a movement of people. Like, let's just put it this way, we look at this flag behind me. Presidents are temporary, Wu-Tang is forever. I love that. That's going to be my banner until the election is over. And I even have a sign out in front of my house that says it. My mailman takes pictures of it. It's great. you know, but we need to educate folks on how to leave this system, because even here in shitlib country, they're not happy with what they have, but they're definitely not going to go the other way. And a lot of times the libertarian message is a little bit too much for them. And so I figured you're one of the perfect people to talk about messaging, because you are literally one of the few who have been consistent about the message of liberty throughout, the past couple few years I've known you, through social media and having you on my show before and stuff like that. Like, you've been very consistent. The philosopher, your wife, has been very consistent, where a lot of the bigger accounts and the bigger name people have kind of, swayed away from the principles themselves, So how do you think we need to help educate people on liberty better than what we're doing now? Because the message that's been for the past 50 plus years isn't working. Most Americans don't even know what Libertarian Party it is. So, like, where do you think we should go from here?
Sure. I mean, when it comes to reaching people, I mean, we do all kinds of different layers and levels of messaging. So there is no such thing as just this is the one message or this is the one way to do it. But in terms of reaching people, we've always found it best to reach people on the issues that matter most to them, and simply expose how the government gets in the way or how it makes things worse. And some of the most powerful ways I think that people can resist the status brainwashing and get themselves out of it, of course, is in the education, of course, in state schools. It's the indoctrination system. So I think a big part of the cultural shift is definitely there, with parents taking their kids out of state schools, not sending them off to be brainwashed and becoming state socialists. That's extraordinarily important, and so that involves things like homeschooling, private schooling, unschooling, things like that. Of course, we advocate for unschooling as the most ethical form of education. But anything that's a stepping stone, at least getting the kids out of the state brainwashing, is a positive direction. And the more that families can get themselves out of that system, and the more they can help their children think outside the state, because it's not just a constant inculcation about that if you're in a different environment, that is going to lead culturally to a net positive. Because the more that you're in a state system, just the nature of incentives, the more you think this is the only way this could be, right? Whether, it's in the public school, state school paradigm, like, oh, see, without this, everybody would be dumb, they couldn't read, and other silly things like that. So you have to pull people out of that in order for them to realize that there is a better way to learn and a better way to have children grow up to become responsible adults. So that to me is a big core. And then outside of that, it just depends on whatever is culturally a big issue. I think right now, one of the big cultural issues that people are really starting to wise up to is how much the government is sending to other countries and other people, while literally being depleted of resources that were supposed to be for helping people in times of emergency. So that's an important message right now that is glaringly obvious, and people across the board are like, oh, okay, so you're going to send billions and billions of dollars to XYZ countries, from Ukraine to Israel to wherever. You're going to, house different people who, are migrants or whatever, and you'll give them healthcare and education and also their stuff, underneath government stipends. Meanwhile, you're totally, bankrupt otherwise for helping regular Americans. That's a starting point for people where they start to realize, oh, okay, wow, this is what the government's really doing, with your money. And then, of course, that opens a door to the conversation that that's not just a fluke. That's not just, oh, it's these people in office. This has actually been going on a long time. And you could walk through the history of the government using resources to fund everyone and everything except for the supposed things that, they say, like my roads. And meanwhile, the government's 35, probably going to be 36 trillion in debt soon enough. That just means your roads are debt. You know what I mean? It's like you bought a car or a laptop on a credit card. Like, I have this thing. It's like, okay. And you have all this debt and you have no money to pay that debt back. So, you know what I mean? You're about to be out of whatever that is. And that's sadly where America is heading right now. An insurmountable debt situation. I do have some solutions that I've, proposed about how to get out of those things, but the likelihood of anyone in power meaningfully doing that is, seeming less and less likely by the day. So I would say it's, a financial inevitability of economic collapse, of course, in the end, sadly, but we'll deal with it. And, those of us who know what to do when you have collapsing empires will fare a lot better than those, who don't. So that's about it.
Well, I'm kind of glad you brought up the government spending and taking care of our own compared to taking care of others. Because when Maui was on fire, which was last year, I believe, the days all run together at this point. So
Yeah.
life is busy. It's like, was that last year? Was that earlier this year? But no, you look at Maui and it burned down. It burned the city of Maui in Hawaii burned to the ground. There ain't much left to it. And those people got $700 checks. And people were pretty pissed about that, as they should be. But then you come to here, to the present, where the hurricanes blow through the South and in the East Coast, and the same thing happens. And they had literally just sent $8 billion to, $8+ billion to Ukraine, and they just sent another $8+ billion to Israel. And then they're like, yo, hurricane victims, here's $750, Jack, knock yourself out. People are a lot more pissed off about this time around than they are, what happened in Maui. Or at least from my perspective on social media and such, and seeing things, that are live. But I feel like this time around is much more, there's a lot more anger behind this than there was that. What do you think is behind that, or what triggers that, or whatever?
Yeah, well, Hawaii is just very distant from most of continental Americans, and it's really kind of an elite rich area, right? Hawaii is, you don't live there unless you're rich and you don't mind that your gun rights suck. So it's not really a common man situation. Whereas the damage and destruction that came through, went up several states, and that hurt lots of regular people across a much wider area and a much greater number of people. So I think it's a lot more present, and there's a lot more eyes on it. There's a lot more surrounding people seeing it. There's a lot more visibility on it. There's a lot more people affected. So just by the nature of that scale and insight into it, and relatability, a lot of people, are really paying attention this time. And of course, more than ever, the government's been throwing money to everybody except Americans. So it's more apparent than ever what the government's doing. Again, it's not new or unique. The government's been doing it the whole time, but sometimes you need something a bit more dramatic and devastating before people start to wake up and feel that pain and say, wait, what is the government doing? Sadly, that's the nature of change, is that a lot of people don't change until the pain is so great that the pain to change is less than that pain to stay the same. So,
and then you brought up, financial collapse and economic collapse. Well, we're close to 36T in debt right now. Our interest on that debt is over $1 trillion at this point. I think it balances out to be a little over $3 billion a day. So a financial collapse is very much in our horizon. As an Austrian economist, like, you look at this stuff and you got to say, hey, it's only a matter of time before the bubble burst. And I think it's about to, which is what has triggered recent events in the Middle East. They're like, hey, we're about to go through a major financial collapse. We can't have that. So invoke World War III. That way we can, money printer goes burr. We're going to invoke, all the, the money printing, so we can just start getting money back in the economy again to help folks out, which is devaluing our dollar. But what's to come from World War III is not even an inflation. It's going to be a hyperinflation. There's going to be shortages. There's going to be chaos from this, and probably an attack on U.S. soil.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not personally so sure that That will be the exact outcome. Of course, when it comes to war, the goal with war, when there's a certain type of economic crisis, is that the government wants to see a lot of people perish, because the more people who die, the less or the fewer people there are who are dependents, or people, who are going to demand things, from the government. So basically, when it comes to those kind of things, they like wiping out anyone who might, be a problem to the situation. And of course, with those people dying, then certain debts go away and this or that because they're dead and all other stuff. So it's a lot of, restructuring debt through death, essentially. So that would be, I guess, my concern there, is if that were to be a thing. I just think that right now it would be very difficult for the government to do anything in terms of a draft or anything like that. I think that if they were to try something of that nature, I think might actually have some violence against the federal government. Now, if Trump were to somehow win and he were to do that, it would get very weird. So that could be that one little like weird situation where, people suddenly like, oh, okay, Trump's saying to go die. So I'll go die for Trump. Whereas, if it were to not be, if it was Dems in, I think there would probably be a bit more violence, if that were to come about.
So you don't think there's a correlation to what's going on in the Middle East to the financial collapse at all, or no?
Not personally, just because I have my overview is always looking at everything long term, right? So this idea that the conflicts in the Middle East are new is just not true. Like, this type of stuff's actually always been going on pretty much almost all the time. The only thing that's new as of late is just the specifics in Gaza, clearing people off to clear out the tunnels. That's kind of more the new thing. But there being, rocket attacks and this or that and threats is actually pretty routine. I would say actually more so I'm curious about the Ukraine-Russia situation, because that's where it seems like, there's a lot more people and a lot more on the line there in terms of, actual resources and large scale armies and weaponry. The Middle Eastern governments, they're not all that, I guess you could say, equipped. Whereas the Russian government has a lot of nukes. So that would be.
Which he just said he wasn't afraid to use. He said he would use nuclear force.
Right. I personally doubt a global nuclear situation. That's my own view. I wouldn't doubt potentially the use of a smaller scale nuclear weapon in Europe at that, Ukraine-Russia arena. That would be more where I would think it end up getting used personally. So that would be more so the concern, and then the type of fear propaganda that would come from that the government would then leverage, of course, just like 9/11 and, towers, and using that to get people to just willingly sacrifice themselves. So that's the thing, is being vigilant and making sure that people know that you don't have to join in this. And in fact, if they try to force, whoever, to join into it, then that's the time to pick up arms and turn it on the government, basically. So.
Wow, you're speaking to my heart right now. Which I literally just got kicked off my record label last week. So a lot of people didn't know I was signed to a record label. They kicked me off for saying something similar to what you just said. So, you're speaking to my heart right now, but, I didn't say that in so many words, but I was like, hey, maybe 100,000 plus people need to get on DC's doorstep and get in there and start making citizens arrests for treason at the very least. Not to mention crimes against humanity, war crimes, trafficking of not only sex trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking. Our government are the kings of all the above. The proof's in the pudding. There's too many receipts. They gave us too much internet to know otherwise. Like, they're like, here, guys, have this internet. And you're going to have all this access to information. And now we have all the information. And they're like, wait a minute, that might not be right. Because it's not our information, it's not, and they're using it against us. But like, we're at a point right now where a revolution is a must, and I would like to say a peaceful revolution is a must. Is there such a thing? I don't really know. I would think that maybe making citizens arrest could, do something to wake people up, but like they have so much power and money at this point. There's so much power and money in the federal government that isn't even possible to take it down in any manner, like whether it be whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few avenues. One of the ones that I think is kind of seeming probable, in just in terms of real action, would be unifications of various state heads, governors, and their legislatures saying, "Okay, we're going to nullify, we're going to take things to a borderline secession." I think that is very much on the table in terms of it's been happening in piecemeal ways, different types of nullifications against gun laws or amnesty and this, that. So that's kind of been tiptoeing that way. And I do think that is, more than ever becoming realistic, especially with what the federal government is doing in terms of war and spending. And, as you see with the emergency stuff, there's certainly been enough state legislatures and governors who are starting to come together in that kind of, manner to say, that these lines are starting to get drawn. So, that certainly happened in the American Civil War, of course, over different pretenses. So it's not unrealistic to think that such could happen again, where, this line, of course, would be over a much better line, I think, a line of basically saying the federal government is literally just absolutely insane and stealing from everybody and completely imploding the country's survivability in terms of the economic situation. That would be a nice line to draw it over and to say enough is enough. I think that's plausible. But outside that, like a Romanian peaceful revolution, that could be tough. Just given the circumstances. I was kind of joking with this the other day that the best odds that we have right now is that the federal government's so DEI'd right now that most of the soldiers, the overwhelming number of new recruits are just kind of weak and are there for, their college scholarships and stuff and just to get out of town. And there's not a lot of people who are in the military right now who are there for like the old purpose, that you'd think of commonly of like, I want to protect America and, I want to make America safe and that kind of thing. There's not really a lot of, at least in terms of what they imagine, virtuous reasons to be in the military. Of course, virtue and the reality of what they do is different, but just the reasons why people are there. Just personally, from what I've seen in a lot of, videos and reporting and all the stuff they've been doing for so long, it is kind of a clown show with the roster of people that they have in the federal government, these kinds of people that are in these positions and who they're intentionally bringing in and attracting, into the various branches. So that's a pretty big weak link that they have right now is the DEI version of the federal government is, not going to be too effective, you know what I mean, at taking care of things. So whereas, in the FBI CIA, there's still some of those people. There's still some more of the machismo people. Local police, of course, has the most, but the current landscape on the U.S. military and a lot of the higher federal positions is not very good in terms of strength and intelligence. So,
well, the military's in bad shape. This is why they keep deploying National Guard people overseas to fight in these wars and stuff. They're sending National Guard to the Middle East right now. The National Guard has no business leaving U.S. soil ever. They're the National Guard for a reason. That's why they're called the National Guard. It's not just a clever name. Those guys are supposed to protect our borders and our rights. But because they messed up so bad during COVID, and this is, I'm going to blame the COVID response on the mass depletion of the military, is because they tried to force shots on these guys and they said, hell no. And then they left, they were let go and got dishonorably discharged or whatever. And then they begged and pleaded, oh, we changed your mind. Come back, guys. We want you to come back. And they said double middle finger, like, yo, we're not doing this. And now all of a sudden you're seeing National Guard troops from, each state being deployed overseas. That's terrifying because there's nobody here to protect us other than ourselves, which is fine. This is why we have guns in the United States. We are the largest standing militia in the entire world. It's not even close. So we need to start acting like it, pretty much, is what I'm getting at, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how it's going to probably fall at this point. Just given all the circumstances. So we're seeing those lines, start to be drawn. And I think you're seeing it, of course, a lot along red versus blue, just the nature of the mainstream political paradigm. But with that, the red is starting to get a little tinge of yellow in the process socially in many of those states, which is good. So it's just a matter of time. I think it's just not sustainable. You can't have this situation where it's constant debt, and then they're intentionally funding people to come across the border and giving them Cadillac welfare benefits. Right. It's a whole intentional thing when they're literally flying people over, busing people in, all this stuff. And that is creating, this crazy rift, for people, more than ever. I mean, that it's getting real hard when Americans are being completely, destroyed economically, and they're feeling destitute, and you have these emergencies and all sort of stuff. And then they're watching everybody else get a piece, of the tax pie, essentially. So there's a lot of resentment being fostered. It's just a matter of, and I think this is the hard part for people to do too, is to focus that anger and that energy on the people doing these things, not on the people being used as political pawns, whoever it is, whether it's people who are, from Mexico or Colombia or Venezuela, or whoever. Those are people being used by the federal government. And the real enemy are, of course, those in the federal government, those who are actually funding these things and picking winners and losers and stealing from everyone and giving everybody else guns in the world while trying to disarm us. That's the root. And I think that if people lose sight of that root, then they don't solve any of the problems. They just go and they say, oh, well, let's make that government that's bringing these people in and funding them and giving money to all these countries stronger, which is absolutely insane to me that, you think the same people who created these problems are going to be the ones that solve it. If you just vote this time on a single issue, and magically now everything's great. So I think overcoming that hurdle is a big a big deal.
So I'm glad you brought that up then, because, one of the big rifts within the Libertarian Party is in the Libertarian Party, when it comes to, don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, don't violate private property, that's pretty much a common thread through the Libertarian Party. Like everybody, no matter what caucus, you're with, can agree on that. But then there's certain things within the Libertarian Party that they don't necessarily ever want to deal with, at least from my perspective. There's a few things that, create big rifts between libertarians, which one of them is the border. You have your open border libertarians, and you have your, I don't want to call them closed border libertarians, but they want some sort of, I don't want to say checkpoint, but like, you got to make sure people are straight that are coming here. We want to make sure that they're peaceful people coming here, rather than, being on the run, wanted for crimes for whatever it may be, and I know you have a pretty good stance on it, but let's hear it from you.
Yeah, I mean, and that whole situation, it's kind of funny because a lot of times these people who are arguing over these issues, I found that they end up like actually coming much closer to each other in the end. Like if you think, for example, like with the Reason people versus, what was BC's caucus kind of divided at some points and others, it's just got to a point where they're almost saying the same things at some point because they're all now suddenly agreeing, oh, yes, the border should have checkpoints and people should be searched and they should be vetted, and they should pay a fee even if necessary in order to come in for citizenship. So it's kind of strange to me how things end up kind of like going that way in the end for a lot of these different factions. But fundamentally, I think that what's missed by everybody to me is that none of these situations or solutions are really getting to the root. A lot of people are focused on how much power the government should have to pick who should come over and what's the quality of the person. Do they have a PhD, or how rich are they, that kind of thing. Whereas for me, the focus is always supposed to be about how you get less government involvement through privatization. So the focus, as libertarians should be, okay, what land is the federal government controlling that should be put into private hands? A person, I'd say through auction or some market means that it's at least getting it there, and then money's from there in part, be restituted to people. But why is nobody saying that at the forefront? Why is nobody saying, hey, we're about property rights. We want to have the federal government to not manage as much as possible, because we know what the federal government does. It's the worst possible organization you could possibly want to have managing these things. We don't, want federal troops managing thousands of miles of border. We want to have it become more decentralized and localized, and get it down into private individual hands, and let private market incentives help provide for those, types of situations, whether it's just defense against bad actors, or whether it's means for people to trade and travel and whatnot. So to me, that's just what I find frustrating, is that everyone's arguing over these policies that they don't even control anyway. They don't control 1,900 plus miles of the southern border. They're not able to control every single boat or every person that could try to climb a part of a fence wall or swim over. They also have to control the border states too, like that, those governments, because different governors and legislatures of different states might have different things. So it's kind of just a silly circle power fantasy that to me doesn't help anybody be consistent. If you want to at least get people consistent, if they don't have the power, the idea is, hey, we should be thinking about privatization, private solutions. How can we advocate for these things? And so that to me is what's often lost in the mix when people are just getting angry over each other, over things they have absolutely no power to control. Even, they're like, oh, I got a podcast with 100,000 subscribers. Like, cool. And you have zero power over a single inch of the border. So who cares? Great. You're here to educate people about the principles, so that in whatever capacity the person who's learning has, they're able to think outside the state, think through things in privatization, and be consistent in solutions that are like, yeah, get the government out. So, that'd be my point of frustration with everything, is that's just lost in this, perceived power struggle of, oh, we need open, we need close, and all this other stuff. So, it's the nature of people trying to play sides and pander to different groups for the sake of popularity or acceptance. And comes with territory.
Which I do agree with you a lot of that, because I've been saying the whole time, I'm like, private property rights fixes all of this. You sell that land to somebody, they can defend it as they see fit. They can let people in if they see fit, whatever they want to do, But, I also see it from the other standpoint of, what's the point of having a country if you're just going to let everybody in? I do see that, vantage point, just because, you're supposed to be a country. You're supposed to, whatever it may be. Or maybe that's a little bit of my old statist side coming out. I don't really know, but I do know this, that the property rights thing fixes everything. Sell it to a farmer, sell it to, a land developer, whatever it may be. And then those people can defend that land as they see fit. That's the only way I see, the border being at a regulated standpoint per se. But that's
yeah. And also the other issues there is that there's so many other separate issues that people conflate with this. Like, for example, citizenship, right? So what people are afraid of is, oh, if they come here, then they have a baby, they're an anchor baby, then they become a citizen, they get welfare and all sort of stuff. And I say, yeah, that needs to be divorced from the situation. We should be able to have freedom of people being able to trade and travel and act peacefully, but without them becoming citizens. That's the root issue. So end birthright citizenship, right, as a focus. And again, I don't have the power to end it outright, but I want culturally to educate people on this, to end it. Because if you end it and you make it where it's like, oh, okay, you don't automatically have, the rights to do all these things, which are not even real libertarian rights. You have no positive right to vote in libertarianism, because voting is not ethical. It's not democracy is not something that you have, this property rights to, and I have a right to vote. You don't. So I think getting rid of those perverse incentives when it comes to welfareism and citizenship is one of the most core things to talk about. And if you don't have the power anyway to change those things, then it doesn't matter what you say. If you haven't taken the power from those in government to pick and choose winners and losers, and to house people, give them driver's license, cars, all this other stuff, well, then who cares? What are you going to do about it, right? You can sit there and whine and complain, but as long as there's different governors in different states willing to fly people over, willing to let boats, come in, willing to let people across for whatever reason, or to give an amnesty thing. I mean, there's amnesty being given to tons of people, including Ukrainians. There's a program for that too. So, it's just a matter of saying, hey, if you actually had enough power to control these many places and this much miles and this much money, right, you can do the right thing, right? It's insane to believe that you can only do one policy and you magically have this power over all these different states and jurisdictions, localities, and land and air and water. And magically, just one word, one bill, and boom, everything's perfect, right? If you had that level of power, you can do it right with privatization. That's why I try to remind people when they say, well, the welfare state needs to be in the first. And I said, if you have that much power that you can end the welfareism of, 20 different states and control all this land and have it monitored and have it, controlled completely, boy, you can privatize too. So it's just a silly thing. It's if you had that level of influence and authority in a governmental sense, you could accomplish the rest of that stuff. And that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be like, and now we're going to create a police state. So, that's what I just like to point out is that wide gap between people's political power fantasies, right? And what they imagine versus, okay, and what do you actually do? Twitter person, do you actually have any power over this? No. Okay. You're not head of border patrol. You're not the president. You're not the entirety of Congress, whatever. So realistically, what's in your power to educate others on the principles so that they say, yeah, government's not the solution to the problem. Let's think about how to get government out. Let's privatize whatever it is, whether it's a park or whether it's land at the border or whether it's retirement things, with the Social Security. We need to think about privatization and getting the government out of it.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. It's like most of these people are like, well, they come in here and get all this free shit. Take away the free shit and you have a different animal at the border. I'm telling you right now, if you take away the welfare state, that border is a totally different issue. And it might even be obsolete at this point because most people are coming here for the free shit. Most people don't have a problem with immigrants. They have a problem with welfare. But then if they have a problem with welfare, they have a problem with government, not the immigrants.
Right.
It's just how it works. Now there's another big issue within the Libertarian Party that has taken by storm and created big rifts. I'm actually a part of that rift because I feel some type of way about it. But it is the transing of children. Like there are some libertarians who are like, well, the state doesn't need to be involved in that. It's up to the parents and the doctors and such like that. But if you're a believer in the NAP, you're literally violating that NAP to that child because they cannot consent. But that's been a huge thing in Libertarian Party, especially when it comes to the quote unquote presidential candidate that they have at the moment.
Yeah, and just to be clear and to be fair to him, he never said that children should have a physical surgery that is removing body parts. He Correct. Said it would be up to parents' decision whether they want to use hormones. My position is simply that when it comes to a bodily functioning, it doesn't matter whether it's for transing or anything else. You could be like, I'm going to cut off a finger. The question is the child's body part healthy and functioning, right? If it's healthy and functioning, and a parent is forcibly removing it, I think that is unethical. And now the question there is, okay, well, where are you drawing a line between, okay, it's okay to use force against a parent, for a child, and then of course you have to deal with the ripple effects. Okay, well now you're using force against a parent and you're separating them from the child, but who's taking care of the child now and why? And it doesn't just end. It's not like the end of a movie and the curtains and the credits close. So there's a lot that has to be thought of past that point. For me, I think libertarians could probably strike a balance potentially where they could make it that if a child has one of these types of surgeries, they could have a legal claim against a parent if they didn't agree with what was done to them. I think that's one possible intermediate step. In the same way that, if, a parent was like, well, I'm going to circumcise my kid or something like that. Okay, well, you could have a claim against that. A parent, right? They take on the risk that if they do this because they believe it's necessary for health of this, that, then a child could sue a parent, at majority. But in terms of anything else, I think it's just one of those difficult situations where you have to be careful about what it is that is advocated for, especially when it comes to government. And certainly I would say, no parent should be cutting off their child's breasts or genitals or any of that type of stuff. I think that is highly unethical, and it's destructive. It's not reversible, and they shouldn't be giving kids hormones, for the purpose of changing the gender, obviously. I just think that it has to be very carefully dealt with because it's very easy, as with anything when it comes to trying to involve government and parents and things like that, that it has to be balanced with not creating, a nanny state on parents and then, saying, oh, okay, well, what does the government get to control? When is what a parent chooses abuse versus not, right? If you get your little kid an ear piercing now and they're, 10 years old, is that abuse now? You just pierce their body, right? So it's a lot of things to think about. I take, of course, the non damaging approach. Like I'd be against even giving, a 12-year-old an ear piercing personally. So I think that it's really going to be a matter of education. It's going to be a matter of helping parents avoid that. And then potentially, as an intermediate step, legal course of action. Child says, my parents cut off my ding dong, and you have damages in the same way that if someone, who's just not your parents gave you an injury, you would have redress, just like any other situation. So, it's something though that is very frustrating, and it's very, difficult to see because it's literally destroying a child's, functioning body parts the rest of their life. And by and large, most are going to end up hating what happens because it doesn't, give you the other working body part to do those things. All it does is deprive you of your working body part. So now you just have damaged tissue and you're in pain, and you're literally in living hell in some situations. So it's absolutely torturous. So,
and then there's one more issue that libertarians cannot get with, or some are with it and some are not with it, and that's abortion. Like there's certain issues that the Libertarian Party tiptoed around for many, many years until like probably the last 2 to 3 election cycles. They started getting involved with culture war stuff and such like that, which they really needed to try to be relevant. You gotta, but you also have to have a stance. And right now, you have half the party saying we're against this, and we have the other half of the party saying it's none of your damn business, or whatever. We look like buffoons at a certain point, and it's one of the many reasons that, in my opinion, that the party can't be taken seriously, because they can't even get 100 people. Anybody who's been to a state convention or a national convention will realize that if they can't get 100 people to agree in one room, you're going to have a very hard time getting millions and millions of people to back you and give you money at that, but abortion's one of the big ones too, and to me, but I am a Bible believing Christian man. I do believe that it's infanticide, but I also believe in, life of the mother, stuff happens, rape, incest, stuff like that. Like, I don't think a woman should be forced to have a baby in those instances either. It's a tiptoe, and I have the wrong genitalia to really even give a shit or to have an opinion, right? No,
you can have an opinion. Of course, you can have an opinion, but like, to me, it's just the thing that at least if we're going to talk about the LP, what they should just simply focus on and just leave it at that is basically get government out of subsidizing it, funding it, that kind of thing. I think that like Ron Paul focus is the way to go, is that the Libertarian Party can say, we're not taking a stance specifically on abortion itself, but we think that the best way for it to be dealt with is through voluntary means of education and getting the government subsidizing all the bad incentives of it, funding Planned Parenthood, all this other stuff. If the Libertarian Party just stays on that, then it's just like, cool, okay, whatever. Get the government out. At least that's a good start, right? Because the government is also killing babies. So it's like, let's
all day, every day.
Right. So it's like, you care about babies at a bare minimum. If we could all get behind it, you know what? Let's not have the government be funded so much to engage in all this war and theft and starving people and blowing people up and funding all these different clinics. I think that's the safe way to go. I have my own opinions about that too. I note in my book that's extremely nuanced compared to a lot of people out there, but I just think that that's really what the libertarian focus should be, is that root theft and that root issue of trying to get government out of subsidizing it and fostering it, which is such a big deal. I mean, there's so much money that comes out of tax, theft that goes to those different organizations and goes to, all kinds of crony deals, I guess you could say, when it comes to these types of situations. So and the welfareism too, of course, incentivizing people just to stay on those welfare systems and to subsidize them continue to live recklessly, essentially people living recklessly. So I think realigning incentives is a big deal for that.
That's right. And it's hard to disagree with that. And my personal beliefs are, I try not to let them get in the way as much as possible, but they do sometimes, and that's a fault of mine. That's something I have to deal with. But but we all have them, and I don't necessarily, even when I was a libertarian, like there was things I didn't disagree with, or that I agreed with the whole platform, like as much as like legalizing drugs. Like I think that's a disaster. Look what's going on in the West Coast right now. They decriminalize drugs, and look at LA. Not, say no more. But I do understand the concept of why they want to do that. Do I understand it? Of course I understand that. But do I believe that's a good idea? Not so much.
Well, I mean, the thing with LA and San Fran, those are not, full recreational markets. They're not, obviously not a true free market where people, have storefronts and that kind of thing. Rather, the governments there subsidize the addiction, and they, give them Narcan stuff, and then they remove people's ability to have property rights. Basically letting people sleep everywhere in the streets, and basically punishing people for trying to stop them, whether they like say, oh, you could steal up to $900, or they arrest people for trying to defend themselves against crackheads. I think that those are more so the issues there is a lack of privatization, a lack of true free market, where you have, open market accountability and you have real help for addiction, and then subsidizing the addiction afterward, which of course that's, what the government does with their welfare programs for those things, and letting people continue their addictive lifestyles, government subsidized, and then punishing people who wish to stop that through private property means, whether that's direct self-defense or just having private property and privatization, instead of this tragedy of the common situation, where people are constantly fighting each other over these shared resources of, who gets what. So I think that that's really more so the root than drug legalization on its own. I think actually, if you look, the closer we get to real decrim and then legalization, the more actually people choose safer, better things. A lot of what is people getting addicted, worse and worse, often is a product of them having tainted products and cut products and stuff, black market, where it's like they have one thing, but it's cut with something else. And then they get addicted to that and, go down a deeper, rabbit hole, unfortunately, with addiction. Whereas if they had something that was, clean, safe, effective, for a high, and they could actually choose and, be judicious in that accordingly, it's not. And if there's, anything that's cut with that shouldn't be in there, there's this legal accountability. I think that's a whole different landscape, just like alcohol or places that have full recreational cannabis, it's a different landscape there. It's a lot more safer. There's more accountability, and, you have more judicious use.
Well, we have full legal cannabis here, recreational, all of it here in Michigan.
Yeah.
Just down the road at the infamous 8 Mile, that's where all my pot shops are, where I go get my stuff, But I will say this, with the legalization of it, the licensing has become an absolute nightmare for the shops. So that's why, like, when we talk, legalization and decriminalization, I'm more for decriminalization because of that fact, but that also opens the floodgates of black markets. But as an anarcho-capitalist, I'm not really mad at black markets, because that's the only true free market there is. I mean, there's no free market other than the black market, or my boy Zach would speak of the gray market that the agorists speak of, But, I get, where you get to your state places, you go to your state facility to go get your weed or whatever, maybe it's been tested and triple tested and there's nothing in there or whatever. I just say grow your own shit. You know what I mean? Just grow your own, what's in there. It's just like your food, raise your own meat, grow your own, crops and stuff like that, grow your own. But it's a sad state of affairs to see what happened here in Michigan, because one of the shops I went to, they made the licensing such a nightmare for recreational licenses. It was very easy for a business to get their medical license. But when it came to rec licenses, Oh, did it get picky and choosy? And it was all about who was rubbing elbows with the local city council. My shop is more like me. They're on the anarchist side of things. They aren't kissing any ass. They did not get the recreational licensing. And when it came back again, they got turned down again. But the place next door, who was rubbing elbows with the local city council, got all the bells and whistles and licensing, and even advertisement. Hey, we'll put you up on a flyer and shit like that. You know, so the difference between the legalization and decriminalization is just that: is who's going to get ahead faster, who's going to get more money faster.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, I just want it to be government out of the equation entirely. Of course, that's what I would like ideally. And obviously, whenever there is crony licensing schemes, and it's going to be whoever pays off whoever the most, as it tends to go. So absolutely, completely agree there that it shouldn't be a controlled market. It shouldn't be limited licensing schemes. It should be a real free market, and people being able to provide robust value without worrying the government is picking winners and losers based on who's paid the most in campaign contributions. It's like, so.
Well, it's kind of like an election, really. It's like, one thing I've learned in this almost 3 years I've been doing this show is, number one, I'm dumbfounded, really, by talking to people like Larry Sharp and Michael White, the people who have run for office, is that all it is one big, giant fundraising mechanism. And whoever raises the most money wins. That's exactly what it is. And even if you do the right thing and you get your money and you get your signatures and you go do the right channels, they can shut you down anyways. They did it to Larry Sharp in 22. He got all his money, he got all his signatures tenfold, by the way. And they're like, oh, by the way, we just changed the rules. You got to do this. And then he went and did it. And then the state GOP turned around and sued him to keep him off the ballot, and they won. Same thing with our Senate candidate. Like, here in Michigan, he's running against Alyssa Slotkin, who is one of the murder cult's finest. She is she's a CIA's bitch, pretty much. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And then you have Mike Rogers, the surveillance king, the guy who wants to spy on you for anything and everything. And then you have Joseph Solis Mullen running as a libertarian. He knows for a fact he's not going to win. He told me straight up, to even be considered for a debate, he would have to raise $3 million. The name of the game is money when it comes to this stuff. And when you speak of nullification, you can cut their legs right off that shit. You spoke about nullification a little bit ago, which speaks to my heart. We need to be focusing more on localization than these clowns who are running for president or, any type of federal office. We're not fixing it. There's no fixing the federal government. It's over. It's a wrap. But what we can do is get our people and their local mayors, county commissioners, city clerks, sheriff, even some places, they vote on police chief, people like that. Start getting those people in there, and then you can nullify yourselves from the state. You see it, believe it or not, there's Orange County, California, who my boy Mike decentralizes there. He speaks of it a lot. Orange County, California has nullified from the state of California. They don't talk about it on the news. They don't want you knowing about this stuff. But like when Gavin Newsom puts all his gun nonsense up there, it tells you how you're going to cut your own grass. No, they're not doing that in Orange County. That's Southern California, by the way. They're not doing it. They're nullifying themselves right now just from him. And we could do that everywhere. We could do that where you're at. We could do that where I'm at. But it's education. It's getting people outside of the grain. Like I said, I'm in shitlib country. They're not going to vote for Trump. They're definitely not voting for Trump. And the libertarians, have some messengers out there that are not the best. You're one of the best, by the way, honestly. But like, they look at these people and they're going, and myself included, I'm not the best messenger at all times. You've actually called me on my own shit a couple times, going, hey man, what's your deal? And I'm like, well, you have though. And I appreciate that. We all need to be called out, seriously. And I can take constructive criticism. Most can't. I could have been like, F you, Jack, I'm going to block you, No, No, why? Why? I've actually learned a lot from you. So whatever. But like education is key at this point. So when it comes to messaging, before we close out, what is your message to the Libertarian Party about getting the message out? Because I think they're doing a very bad job at this point. I think they
Yeah,
might.
I would say right now, the people who are, to a degree, again, there's different people, so it's not everybody, but there's a large segment of the LP leadership that wishes to basically use the organization as a means to, sell the votes in exchange for quid pro quo situations, right? Could be like, oh, if we'll get staff positions or you'll do something that we want, we'll kind of either tacitly support you or say our candidate will go after the other party. And while on the face that might sound nice and be like, oh, well, look, see, we have relevance and they want to, come to us and come to our events. The question is that actually getting the material change you're looking for? Or is no matter what, at the end of the day, the government's still growing and you haven't sustainably changed anyone's mind or sustained the organization itself? There's not really going to be much left over if the people who are there end up completely leaving because they're like, okay, well, you're saying to support the other people, so why would I go through a middleman? Why would I go through a middleman organization just to go and support them? I'll just give my dollars directly to the candidate you say I should support instead of you. So I think that it's a very bad move. It certainly is a good move if you're going to get something out of it, and you're one of the couple people who might get something personally. But in terms of an organization, it's simply not sustainable. You're telling your membership and you're telling people, hey, we're not worthy of supporting. In fact, the people to support are outside this organization, and go help them. Don't support us. So there's really nothing left at that point. And I think that the evidence of that continues to grow. That's the net result. So for the Libertarian Party, even if you think, oh well, they're just going to be politically useless, which I do find funny because for being politically useless, of course, these other people are coming in and pandering and wanting to speak and get votes. If you want to actually have something worthy of being pandered to, you actually have to stand out from both the Republicans and the Democrats organizationally. You have to be an organization that is distinct and that is teaching people the principles of liberty in a sustainable way. And if you don't have that, then you don't really have your reason for existence. At that point, you're going to lose your core fan base. So I would say the LP probably will need to reorient and become more laser focused on promoting the message of liberty in that way without, being soft on outside candidates, whether they're Republican or independent. And if they don't do that, I think that the end result will be organizational collapse because, again, you've just sent all your people, all your money outside the org, and you've essentially signaled that there's no reason for you to exist in the first place. So, I would say that that's a big part of what needs to shift. The situation that happened, with Chase Oliver, we were there in DC, we watched it all unfold as everyone was freaking and screeching. It's kind of a silly thing that people are constantly fighting each other, organizationally saying, oh, you suck, you're not a real libertarian, this or that all the time, especially when it's candidates, funnily enough, who support pretty much like 97-98% of what the other person does. It gets to a point where it's just not really productive, right? And I understand, there's things about Chase that I don't agree with and I don't like, but I can't help but chuckle a bit when these same people who were saying, oh, war is the most important issue and we need to not support Israel, and we need to do all these things to make sure that we're free of these conflicts. They'll support Trump, who supports these conflicts and who literally supports Israel and literally sent the money as
the guy literally pledged his allegiance to the state of Israel on one of his rallies. I was dumbfounded by that. I'm like, well, we know who Apex bitch is at this point. Because
it's just funny to me. And then, Chase Oliver, who he says things about Gaza that I don't even agree with, but he is clearly anti-war and anti, Israeli government and Israeli actions. But that's not good enough now. that he's, oh, this is the most important issue, but now Chase isn't good enough, even though he literally is more radical than any of these other people you're supporting, Kennedy or Trump. So there's this glaring hypocrisy and a kind of insanity that comes to bear when you see it all, and you realize that people are not dealing on the totality of someone's beliefs. They're not really looking at what they're saying in whole picture. They're just doing the usual, hey, I'm going to find these two issues that we disagree on, and that's the laser focus, and then that's it. And, and organizationally, that doesn't work, right? It's one thing to be like, we're philosophers and we're discussing ideas and we're going to go at each other's throats over this. But if you're a political organization and your goal is to get a unified front, you want people to support your candidates and to fund the organization, you can't go nitpick on, those issues. Even if there is some disagreements here and there on a couple issues, you can't do it. Because you just are signaling to everybody, oh, okay, your candidate sucks. We shouldn't support you because all you do is pick people who suck and who can't do anything. And, oh, see, you highlight their worst attributes. So, it's just going to tank everything in the end. So there has to be a reorganization. And to me, it's that left-right swing, right? When you had Sarwark, things got swung way too far left in messaging. And then, you had Mises Caucus come in and things were going good, but then things started to go too far toward the conservative pandering. And, they started bringing in people who were selling out essentially, for the sake of getting, the potential of staff jobs and potential of joint fundraising and all this other stuff. So now we need basically things to come back to libertarian center, which is that the libertarian center rejects these bickerings about the fringe issues in a political organization. Of course, you can discuss and debate them, for philosophy's purposes. But organizationally, it should be unified on the core aspects: ending the Fed, getting the federal government out of our lives and wallets, ending all this tax theft, decentralization. The government's not the solution to the problems in our life. We need to get kids out of state schools, all this other stuff. And of course, pulling out from all these other countries and stopping funding all these wars and funding both sides of every war too. On top of that, that needs to be the new focus. It needs to go back to what made the Libertarian Party attractive for people to come in and want to fund it and want to be loyal to it, because the disloyalty can't last. It just completely upends the culture, completely upends the purpose. And that happened on the left pandering, and now it's happening on the right pandering. There's not going to be much left because the people who are on the left side, a lot of those people left, or the center left. And then there's a lot of FUD that was spread that wasn't true, but it caused people to leave. And then you had, the conservative to like the ANCAP groups, and you had, diehard Libertarian Party of bus people. And then the ANCAP started to get alienated with the pandering. And then, now you have the Libertarian Party or bus people who are kind of left, and they're watching the organization throw away the little bit of good faith that was left, and the little bit of, credence that was left because of throwing under the proverbial bus, Chase Oliver. And again, I'm not saying he's great. I'm not saying I even agree with him on every single thing. I'm just saying that organizationally, it's going to self-implode. It's self-destructive. You do that and you just told everybody, yep, this organization's just not worth supporting. We can't pick a good candidate. And there's other better ones. Oh, go give them your money. Okay, well, what do you expect? So that would be my 2 cents about what needs to change and to stop chasing, Twitter clout. I think that was lost in the process. A lot of these people believe that's, that your Twitter following is the same as money and people willing to show up. That's just not true.
It's not even real life, dude.
I know it's
like that stuff isn't as much. I spend way too much time on it too. I really do. And I'm literally at the bottom of the algorithm most of the time because I'm not very nice to people a lot of times because, well, I shouldn't be nice to them. Like if they're going to be idiots, I'm going to treat them like idiots. And I'm being very PG at this point, but like, I have a hard time being being optimistic about the party at this point. I think it's in a very, very, very bad situation. It's gonna have a hard time climbing out of this for the reasons you just kind of, elaborated to. The Sarwark people were definitely too left. And some of the Mises caucus people, I've been critical of both. I don't belong to a caucus. Actually, I'm a liar. I'm a part of the emo caucus. I'm a part of that emo caucus because it's fun and it's not political. God, I really think the caucuses drive division, even though the American Liberty Caucus has kind of got my attention right now. Not that I'm going to go join or anything, but like they do have my attention. I actually know who's running that. So, but like there needs to be a point where like, hey, are we left? Are we right? Are we liberty folks? And I think a lot of people lost sense of the we are liberty folks rather than like, well, you know, this person acts like a shit leftard or this one's a weak ass Republican infiltrating the party. Do I believe the party's been infiltrated? Of course I do. I do. I believe that the party is full of feds, and I believe the party is full of people from the uniparty, both sides. I do believe that. But what I also believe is that the liberty itself is worth fighting for no matter what. And we have to get rid of that, left right bullshit.
And that's exactly right. That is what has been lost, is that if people would let go of the left right sides in terms of having to have their social issue be a forefront and just got back to the core of libertarianism and said, no, we're just going to focus on this. We don't care about this other nonsense. We're going to just focus on get the government out of our lives and wallets, cut it out, stop the theft, stop telling us what to do. Let's think of private solutions. Privatization is the way. Free markets save lives. If that is the core, and that's just, hey, that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the economics education. We're going to focus on the evils of government and central planning and their violence and the victimless crimes. If you focus on that core and just leave the other stuff out and just say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I know you might personally have a problem with people who do drugs. I know you might have some problems with abortion, but look, government's not the solution. That's our focus, right? Government is not the solution to life's problems. And we're thinking about how we can deal with addiction, or we can deal with would-be mothers who are considering abortion. How do we deal with those situations outside of state force and theft and violence? If that is the focus and that's all it is, you ignore all the problems that come up with people trying to put their social issue to the forefront. And I think that once people realize that, if they do, and who knows at this point, but if they do and they could reunify under that, there would be something there worth saving and salvaging and getting people back into and excited about. And if that can happen, then those people need to learn that your power politically is not by making pandering or not by compromising. Your power is by being such a force and being such a cultural force that other groups and parties look at you and they want to pander to you. They want to pander to you. Not that you go a deal with them and be like, I'm going to, let's do something. No, they just have to try their hardest to be like you or to make it seem like they're somewhat like you. Because otherwise, if you don't have that core power of people and money, they have no reason to pander. They have no reason to do anything. It's like that kind of funny analogy to like someone who doesn't give up, sex on the first date kind of thing, right? Like once they've, gotten you in bed, like, okay, yeah, I've had that, cool, over on to the next thing. There's nothing left, right? That's what it is. It's like with the LP. Once
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right? Yeah. But once they do it, your power is gone because you've just let it go. They've captured it, and there's nothing else to get because it's over. It's like, cool, you just gave us what you had. You gave us the donor list. You gave us the emails. You gave us the fundraising information. You gave us, okay, yeah, we support you instead. Okay, it's over. There's nothing they need to pander for. They can do whatever they want. They got the power. They got the money. And they're going to be dead after anyway. You know what I mean? Trump's not going to be alive forever. And, whoever else comes after, they're going to, as they do with politicians, they're going to figure out who to pander to next to get their next, batch of money and batch of voters and activists. And that's, of course, why they come. That's why they went to PorcFest like Vivek did and all these other people, because they know if they go to the places where there's the greatest number of hardcore political people, right? These are the kind of people who will go and they'll be your sign waivers. They'll be your signature collector people, because they know that these people go to this crazy niche out in the woods, in the mountains, PorcFest thing. Oh, if we can convince these people to support us, they'll do anything and everything. They'll drive miles, to go sign waiver, to go get signatures, to go, lobby or protest for us. So they're smart. These people who are politicians, they know what they're doing in politics. And it's up to libertarians just to not get duped with false promises and the, hey, I'll give you a kickback kind of thing. And just remember, the goal is always the message, and to grow that to the point that it's just can't be ignored. And that's why the LP was even as strong as it was because it had become a force originally, when the first Mises Caucus takeover, it had become a force that couldn't be ignored. It was that level of excitement and unification and like, whoa, like, okay, wow, there's a lot of people who really support libertarians, right? Just at that little cusp. And that has sadly been lost in time. So, it just needs to get back to the principles and the major focuses, and not playing this quid pro quo games and, I'll support this independent candidate, this Republican candidate. If they promise they'll do, like, no, you can't trust a politician's lies. Like, you can't trust campaign promises. This is like the most obvious thing ever. Like, Bush ran on a humble foreign policy, Obama did. Like, you can't trust these people. So, libertarians need to stand out, organizations need to stick out. And if they do that, they'll attract the right people in terms of people who actually care about liberty. And yeah, you may not win all the elections, you may do this stuff, but you'll actually have such a strong culture that you'll force those other groups to have to pander and to try to get closer to you because they're so desperate to get that edge. And you never give it up. If someone decides to be convinced, that's on them as an individual, but organizationally, you do not give up that political, pussy, essentially. You got to see, keep it strong in order for all these other groups to see that value and to say, oh, okay, we really need to like change our rhetoric and try to pander to try to convince these people, but of course, strong libertarians can't be that easily swayed. So.
My man, I dig that. No, you said a lot and I dig it. Thank you so much. Of
course.
But we're going to close this out. So before we go, tell us about the new venture that just dropped. Tell us how we can find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm super excited. The Voluntarist latest campaign. This is the trade paperback. This is our origins arc, 192 pages. It's really cool. But we are on the next arc, which is Suit Saga, and the Suit Saga is, of course, about how Jack, the character, gets his suit, and we're on the second issue right now. We're on Indiegogo and on Fund My Comic. So on Indiegogo, if you look up Voluntarist, or fundmycomic.com, if you look it up there. Of course, if you go to Volcomic, that's V as in Voluntarist, VOLCOMIC.com. You can also check it all out there, which is really exciting because, there's like sneak previews there, and there's some history and lore and this, that, and that's actually going to get a revamp coming up soon. We have a new website for a new series that's coming out too, called Voluncat One Shot. She's a competitive shooter who's also an ANCAP, and it's the artwork's pretty top tier, so I'm pretty excited about that. And we have a website coming out soon for that as well. So we have lots of things rolling out back to back. Now that we just did the music video, and now we have this campaign, we got another one coming up. So a lot of exciting things going on right now.
You're a busy guy, man. I love it, and I love to see it. And you're doing great things. Thank you for always being, genuine in your principles and never deviating from them. That's one thing I appreciate about people always. Like, that's amazing to me. So thank you so much for your time. Until next time, y'all. Peace, love, and liberty. Be good.
Thank you so much. Take care.